equipment has to be completely replaced.
Good afternoon. The June 7th meeting of the New Ulm Safety Commission will now come to order. Mr. Secretary?
Okay, I got them all? There they are. Minutes from the last meeting, we had started out with annual organizational held and voted on. New members were introduced, Larry Hunstead and Joanne Brennan. Elected officers, John Fritchie as chairman, Don Hellendring as secretary. Volunteered to continue their positions. Bill Ofterheide accepted the co-chair position. Minutes from the November 2017 meeting were read by the secretary and accepted as read. No old business was brought forward. New business. Consider recommendation to install vehicular traffic warning signs on 18th South Street on both sides of the creek culvert crossing west to State Street. Park and Recreation Director Tom Schmidt presented information related to the increased usage of South Park and the disc golf course located there. Following discussion, the commission recommended the installation of signage W11-15 pedestrian bicycle cautionary sign on the east side and west traffic bound at 18th Street prior to the narrowing. Motion was made by Don Hellendring, seconded by Bill Ofterheide. To recommend that the city council to have the signage installed as requested. Motion was approved by members present. Second item, consider recommendation to install continual longitudinal or diagonal markings on several crosswalks located as presented by Cindy Winters, project manager, Heart of New Ulm. As part of the safety tour to schools, 15 different locations were listed as needing enhancement and marking at locations around school side crosswalks. 2 additional locations were noted as a second choice. Discussion was as to the cost of the paint. Each location is approximately $68, and the manpower to complete the project was mentioned. A question of one location that does not have a sidewalk leading to the location was brought up. After discussion, a motion was made by Bill Ofterheide to recommend to the city council to install longitudinal ladder striping as a safety issue of the 15 locations requested. Motion was seconded by Larry Hunstead and approved by members present. Third item, the presentation was given on the 2018 Minnesota DOT Highway 1415 Gateway Project Overview, Detour Routes, and Construction Staging Map. A question about the entrance to Hy-Vee parking lot was asked, and with additional traffic, only right turns will be allowed at the entrance on 20th Street during the time of the detour, 2 years. Fourth item not on the agenda, was presented by Jim Dresky. To have no parking signs removed on South Payne Street located at the middle school and Jefferson School. Originally, the signs were for bus drop-off and pickup, but the changes to the middle school, the busing, do not use these locations. This would allow teachers to park on the school side of the street. Item was discussed and request to have it placed on the next month agenda. The next meeting was scheduled for May, but none was held. Motion to make an adjournment. Chair adjourned the meeting. That's all, your chairman.
That's it. Any additions or corrections to the minutes? Any addition or correction to the minutes? If not, I'd like a motion.
So move.
Do I hear a second?
A second.
Second and a motion and a second to accept the secretary's report as given. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay. Now we have to get into the old business. Consider recommending parking restrictions on South Payne Street from 2nd to 3rd South Streets with the aerial photo that is attached. This is down by the St. Paul School down there and all across and along that street. What's happening is a lot of the teachers are parking on the street and walking to school, but they also plug up some of the pedestrian sidewalks that go out to the street. And that's the question as to what's going to happen with it, what we're going to do with it. So,
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
if I may, this is a follow-up to the number 4 on your minutes where the individuals, a couple individuals that are on the east side of South Payne Street between 2nd and 3rd were requesting that no parking be eliminated from the west side. And since that time, I've got an email from a couple different individuals. Cindy Winters is one, and also the superintendent of the School District 88 that suggested that that's probably not a good idea. If from your aerial photo, you can see school drop-off exits at that location, and if you allow parking on the west side, you've created some visibility and sightline problems. And in addition, the school superintendent said they're still using that for bus parking and drop-off. So my suggestion would be to probably do some type of permit parking on the other side of the street, maybe just in front of a few residents there so that no one can park there except the people that get permits. The chief might want to comment on that. I think it's done farther to the south. That was an example of a way we kind of limited parking in front of people's homes.
Myron?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct. Years ago, in the 400 block of South Payne, there was permitted parking in front of residents across from formerly the Newham High School, now the middle school, and as such, that parking's been eliminated. Again, less drivers, both students and teachers have their own lots. So again, the suggestion that City Engineer Kaler is bringing, again, you start allowing parking on the west side of Payne Street there. That is used also for pickups. There's a lot of parents that are down there half hour, 40 minutes before school dismissal, waiting for students. And again, the suggestion that City Engineer Kaler brings, permitting parking in front of respective residences there would be, I dare say, a very good common sense answer.
Thank you, sir. What would the cost of this permit parking be? What's it going to cost the homeowner that's going to have it put up in front of his house? Or do you know, or Mr. Kaler, do you know who?
Mr. Chair, it's just some simple signage that the street department prepares and installs, and I don't know if Kurt, it wouldn't be very much. And then I think the permitting process runs through the police department itself, so it's just a matter of issuing a few permits.
Again, the costs would be negligible, and actually the Newham Police Department would eat that, again, nominal fee. I believe the permits cost about $1 when you hit print from the computer onto a printer, so very negligible cost. Again, most of it would be borne by the street department, whatever they would charge for signage.
Right, and that's minimal cost putting the signs up.
Okay.
So no big deal.
No big deal. Okay.
No big deal.
All right. Any further discussion on what's going to happen or how we're going to handle this?
Mr. President,
Yes.
wasn't there some discussion about the teachers parking there and not using the parking lot? And what's changed on that? Why don't they use the parking lot? Remember what they said about the teachers blocking those residential side, whereas they should be using the parking lot, because the parking lot is the old senior high. I mean, there's a lot of room there. And what's happened on that?
Mr. Chair, it's a public right-of-way. As long as there's parking permitted, they can park there. I haven't had any discussions with the superintendent with regard to that. It's kind of beyond my scope. So they park on side streets. I imagine they want to park as close as they can to their office. Speculation on my part.
Mr. Chair, are you looking for a motion then? Is that what you?
Well, I want to get discussion first. Yeah, have our discussion first, and I'll look for a motion. But
Mr. Chair, I got a question on that. Permit parking, Myron, that would be something that would have to go with anybody that wanted to park along that street, is that correct? They'd have to have some type of a permit in their window to park there?
That's correct. Some kind of discernible, again, emblematic display. And again, depending upon the action taken by the council, upon recommendation by this group, could be a single stall in front of a residence, could be the entire block. It would again be subject to whatever the city council ultimately decides.
So, correct me, if somebody parks there and they do not have a permit, is that liable for a fine?
Yes.
Okay. How do you handle that with the visitors coming to see the residents along that street?
Ultimately, if there's availability along Payne Street, otherwise visitors would be subject to finding parking on a side street or wait until a spot would open up.
You know, I hear what you're saying, but is that gonna create a big issue or a big problem? Say, if, for example, if Bob comes to visit somebody down along that street, he does not have a permit, and you come by and you slap a ticket on his window, that's not gonna sit very well with Bob. You know what I'm getting at?
Excuse me, Chief, isn't the permit parking on 4th South, the signs are still up, isn't it? Like from 7:30 to 2 o'clock, Monday through Friday? I think it's a time window that the permit parking is in place.
oh, okay.
If I remember reading, I just read the sign this afternoon, and I believe that's what it said. In front of the church, there's still signs up there. So it can be set,
Okay.
you can,
Permit
request.
required, permit parking required during the 8 to 4?
I believe it, right now, it states 7:30 to 3:30, Monday through Friday,
Okay,
on 4th South.
okay.
So you could request any time frame you so desire.
I think there's some signs also that saying during school. Maybe I read that
Hours?
on the other side,
Other
maybe.
side.
Yeah, I
On the
think-
other side, it says during school hours.
Correct.
Um,
That could apply out here also if you so desire. Yes.
might be an option.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, Bill, you know, with that side of the street, the west side of the street. What concerns me is on the resident side of the street.
Yeah.
You know, somebody coming to visit, no permit, Myron comes along and he slaps a ticket on him. And that will not set very well when they just come to see a friend down there. I don't know how you rectify that or how you make that right.
I have a question in reference, would each property owner have an individual, like one spot at their house and not, because what's normal is what, 2 or 3 parking spots for a lot?
It could be signed any way you so desire. It could be one per lot, it could be the whole block, as Chief
Yeah.
stated.
And I,
But if it's not signed permit parking, that means anybody, not just friends. That
Right.
means anybody can park there.
Right back to square one, yeah.
right, well,
Back to
but
square
what I'm
one.
saying is if, you know, this person was indicating, the one that brought up the issue was he had to have the, picked up and taken
Heartland
for.
bus. Yeah, they have
Yeah,
Heartland
the
bus.
bus come
Yeah.
by, and they were parked right off his access to the street, and that was his worst concern. So would that be that type of a situation where each property owner would have one slot somehow indicated for those requesting a permit? That way you've got this area that is theirs. And anybody parked in that area, if it isn't his vehicle, would then be liable for, you know, they can't park in his area, they have to leave that spot.
No.
Doesn't have to
Well-
be the entire street. You maybe only have 2 or 3 people that want this. I don't know.
Mr. Chair, it could be like the northern 100 feet, or we'd maybe probably have to poll the residents and see, because there's a daycare farther to the north, maybe they don't want, maybe they want to be able to have their people park out there, I don't know. So I think the idea is to try and get some permit parking for these 2 individuals that would like to have a space for the bus or
Or the
whoever.
exit, yeah.
And I'm sure the police are not gonna ticket the Heartland Express bus while they're picking up people.
If you do, they're in
So,
trouble.
I mean, it's kind of a simple solution in my mind.
Right.
I was just gonna ask, what is the process for getting a handicap spot in front of your house? I've seen those around town.
Well,
Would that,
generally comes from a recommendation from this commission as well.
Okay.
And there you need to show some type of a need typically.
would that be a solution for, if it's specific individuals or not? No?
They may not be technically handicapped.
Sure.
So you'd run into that issue.
Okay,
That'd be kind of a gray area as for what's handicapped and what
Sure.
isn't.
okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion? Otherwise, I will call for a motion. Any further discussion? Let's hear something, people. I can't make a motion.
Sure you can.
Sure
I
you can.
could, but it would not be proper, let's put it
Oh,
that
it's
way.
proper. You remember.
I'm a member, but it would not really be proper, but
I'll try to make a motion that we allow for permit parking on the east side of Payne Street. What block areas are we looking here?
Second or third south.
Second, third south. Upon individual request. I think to keep it from being the whole block. I think individual requests for it. Then they can find out who wants it. So, permit parking,
okay. Everybody's heard the motion, do I hear a second?
I'll second.
You'll second it? I have a motion and a second. I don't want to go all the way through the whole motion because I don't remember every word of it, but it's to add permit parking down on from Second to Third Payne Street.
individual request.
At the individual request. Any further discussion?
Do we need to have anything regarding the west side, or just, that, as long as we don't change that, we don't need to mention that? Okay.
No.
Any further discussion? All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, well, yeah, I think we
Aye.
have,
Got 3 months now to.
Yeah, we
To
got,
address
we got
it.
time to pull it and figure it out.
Before school
we got
starts
time
again.
to get the personal people figured out and stuff like that. I will declare with only one dissenting vote that the motion has passed. Okay. Next thing. I suppose it would be the new business.
Yep.
Number one is consider implementing parking restrictions on North Highland Avenue at Oak Street. The attached email. Mr. Kaler, you want to get into this one?
Mr. Chair, there's an email attached from a resident that experienced or had some concern regarding parking close to Oak Street up on North Highland Avenue. It was forwarded to me by a counselor who requested I put it on the agenda. My suggestion would be that you move into you just probably table it or don't act on it at this point and move into the report on number 3, because that's actually part of a potential alternative presented in that report. So I guess I would just leave it for now, and you can come back to it at the end of the meeting if you prefer.
Okay, if you want to do number 2 first then?
Sure.
All right, number 2 is consider request from Jim Kretsch establishing angle parking on the east side of Minnesota Street between First and Second South Street. Possible parking layout attached. Is this for the, up by the old school, or?
No.
Mr. Chair, this is on South Minnesota Street where they're building I think a 55-unit apartment
Oh, that big
building.
apartment complex, okay.
From First to Second South. Currently, there's parallel parking on each side of the street. It's a rather wide roadway. It's 56 feet in width. And because he's taken out all the sidewalk and changed some things around in that area, we need to probably have him consider the ADA requirements, which include ped ramps and some on-street parking. So probably the best way to accomplish this, and at his request, he was wondering if we could establish angle parking on the east side. You've got a diagram in your packet. We provided an area for the with the bus loading of the Brown County Heartland Express, so they can pull up and park, and then there's some angle parking and also 2 handicap stalls with an access aisle. So I've reviewed this with the owner of the apartments, and he has requested that you consider that this be recommended. There's plenty of width. We keep parallel parking on the other side. We've got 14-foot driving lanes, both going south. Typically, an 11-foot driving lane is sufficient, so I have no concern with this layout.
Yeah, well, it was mentioned that the traffic does move from north to south and that's on that block yet.
It's still one way to the south.
Still one way.
Yep.
Okay? What do you people think?
Mr. President, I would agree with his recommendation. I drove through there, and there appears to be plenty of room to have angle parking. And I think they need more parking for the apartment building, so I would recommend that we do that.
I'll second that.
Okay, well, we have a motion and a second to approve the adjusted angle parking. Any further discussion? Any further discussion on the matter? Okay, then we'll call, then we have the motion ready. There being no further discussion. All those in favor of the motion as presented, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Okay, now we'll go back into number 3. We have a presenter here for number 3, or what?
Mr. Chair, we have Eric Cyberlick, the WSB project manager, was the consultant that we hired to do the North Highland Avenue engineering study. As you recall, I think we started this back last summer, putting a proposal together to look at 4-way stop control at the intersection of Center, North Highland, and Oak and North Highland as well. We couldn't really gather the data until school was in session, so it's been kind of a long process, but we've got the consultant here to present the report.
Are you ready for your report, sir?
Yes, thank you.
State your name and address for the record.
My name is Eric Cyberlick. I'm 2941 Dunlap Circle in Roseville, Minnesota. Thank you all for having me. I have a slideshow. There we are. Can everybody, do you see this up there or on your screens as well?
I'm looking up there.
Yeah, we have
okay.
it both places, yeah.
All right, everywhere.
The screen do what I'm supposed to do.
We were contracted with the City of New Ulm to look at the operations out on North Highland Avenue, the intersections of Center Street and Oak Street, and to look at some different alternatives and see if there is anything that could be done to improve the safety and operations at those 2 intersections, both for vehicular operation and pedestrians and bicycles. So the purpose of our study is to gather traffic data. We did turning movement counts on October 10th, I believe, Tuesday or Wednesday. And then we identified the existing operations and safety at both the study intersections. There was some interest in seeing about always stop control at those intersections. There are always stop and traffic signal warrants that must be met for installation of those types of traffic control. So we use the existing volumes to see if they met the always stop warrants and the traffic signal warrants. We analyzed the intersections with some traffic modeling software, and we also did that for some of the alternatives we looked at for what might be done at these intersections. And then we identified some not necessarily traffic control or geometrical type alternatives, but just some other things that could be done that we'll talk about later. And at the end of our report, provided a recommendation on potential improvements that could make this a safer intersection that operates a little better. Again, North Highland Avenue, it's a major collector between Center Street and Trunk Highway 14 with a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit. Center Street is a county road, county state aid highway. It's also a major collector, and it heads all the way out to Hanscom, comes into the Central Business District, goes past Martin Luther College, of course, so it serves that, and a lot of the recreational facilities. And that has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit as well. And then Oak Street, of course, is a local roadway and serves the New Ulm High School, and that has a 30-mile-an-hour speed limit on the roadway to the east. These are the traffic control and geometry at those intersections, and the numbers on the roadways there are the average daily traffic volumes that some were from our counts in the black boxes, and some were from MnDOT publishes counts that are taken by either the county or the city every 4 years. And so they have that available. Their most recent count was in 2014. Ours was from October of 2017. So we used video cameras to monitor the intersections, and we used tubes that we put down on each approach to the intersection. So the tubes counted the directional volume, and the video cameras, someone actually sat down and watched the video cameras with traffic counting devices to get different movement data for the peak hours that we looked at doing our operational analysis. So for doing the first thing we did is we looked at crashes at these intersections, and you use the crashes. MnDOT has they collect from the local police departments, from the state patrol, from the county sheriff, all the crash information, compile it, and so they had that information. The problem is MnDOT has had a little problem with their system, so they only keep it up through the end of 2015. We also contacted the New Ulm Police Department, and they provided us with crash information at these intersections for 2016 and 17. Mr. Kaler here has been, unfortunately, providing me information as more crashes occur at some of these intersections in 2018. So they have, especially at the high school at Oak Street, there were no crashes prior to 2016, and now there have been with that access and with the high school being built. So we looked at crash rates, we did our operational analysis, and then looked at the warrants. So I will get into that right here. Both of these intersections have higher than average crash rates compared to similar intersections across the state of Minnesota. Minor approach, stop control, low speed, and a low number of lanes. These experience more crashes than do similar ones all over the state. The primary crash that occurs here are right angle crashes. People on the minor approach pulling out and being hit by people on the major approach. And as you see on the bottom one, that's Highland Avenue and Center Street. That's the analysis. The top of that is the crash rate. And it's a little small on our screen, but we look and there were 4 crashes from 2011 to 2015. Usually you look at 5 years of crashes. And our calculated crash rate was 0.31, and that's expressed in a million vehicles that enter the intersection, but it's compared to the state average, which is 0.18. So it's between 1.5 to 2 times the state average. And then there's a severity rate that is based on the type of injuries that are experienced. So that's a different number here, and the intersection is still greater than that severity rate. So there are issues with safety at that intersection. the analysis of the peak hour down there shows that the southbound movement operates at a level of service that's unacceptable. And I'll go back a slide here. And level of service, don't know how familiar everybody is with level of service. It's a letter grade that is used to for measuring how long people wait at intersections. A is the best. That's when you get up to a stop sign and proceed, look both ways and proceed, to F. And now that grade on an unsignalized intersection on the right is a little smaller than at a signalized intersection, because you kind of expect that at a signal you'll stay there a little longer than a stop control. But as you get up into waiting 25 to 35 to 50 seconds, you get into a level of service D, E, and F at stop controlled intersections, and that's really a long time. That's when people start making bad decisions, going into gaps that aren't big enough, and that's when crashes occur. So as we see here, Highland Avenue and Center Street, in the AM peak, that southbound movement, and it's primarily due to the high volume of left turn movements there, is a level of service F. And this really is concentrated into 10 to 15 minutes of the peak hour in the morning. And a lot of that is due to people leaving the high school or coming from the north and trying to get into town, into the central business district there. And then in the PM peak, that 10 to 15 minutes, it's the same movement. The volume's a little bit less, but it's due to the cross traffic, people heading back out. They don't have an opportunity to turn left there. At Oak Street, it's a similar situation. For this one, we didn't use the MnDOT data. As I said before, we're only looking at 2 years of crash data based on what New Ulm Police Department provided us for 2016 and 17. But we're way higher than the state average there. We had 4 crashes in 2016 and 17, and there have been 2 crashes since then. One just occurred last week. And they're right angle crashes. There was one in March that was an injury crash. And it's often inexperienced drivers, and it occurs from people pulling out of the high school parking lot. As we see the analysis here, it's the westbound movement, the one that actually is opposite the high school, that really suffers during peak hours, and that's because most of those people are taking lefts. And so they have to wait not only for the northbound left, which is the primary movement, they have to wait for the eastbound throughs, and they are kind of the last person that has the right of way to go, so they sit there and go through all that and never get to go. And then in the PM peak hour, it's that same movement, because most of the people leaving the high school are taking right turns. We ran traffic signal warrants. We assumed that there's not nearly enough volume at these intersections to meet traffic signal warrants, and there was not. We ran always stop warrants, and neither of these intersections meet the required traffic volumes for warrants. However, there are some qualitative measures that are always stop warrants, such as you can install always stop if you have high left turning movements, because that's a good way to provide a protected way for those people to get through, where otherwise they don't have that. Sometimes they are installed for pedestrians, although there's kind of some conflicting opinions on that, because with certain intersections, wide intersections where there's several lanes, an always stop can be perceived as safer for pedestrians, and it doesn't necessarily exist that way. The always stop warrants were only met for those to control left turn conflicts for both of these intersections, and not for traffic volumes. And then with the Oak Street, because there were more pedestrians at that location, it did meet a possible to benefit pedestrians type warrant. So there is a basis for installation of always stop at this intersection, not the primary one that is usually used, which is the volume one. And then as we get into always stop warrants, there are no warrants which are part of a FHWA published thing. It's nationwide. There are no warrants for roundabouts, but it's accepted that if a intersection meets always stop warrants, it meets roundabout warrants. So a roundabout is warranted in that same thing because they function somewhat similarly. This is just a comparison on the left of the existing condition, the minor approach stop for Center Street, and on the right for Oak Street as we go down. The next one is we modeled it with always stop at those intersections during the peak hours, and we modeled it with a roundabout, these were our three primary alternatives: the no-build, always stop, and a single lane or mini roundabout at that intersection. The always stop does solve the problem with the minor approaches not being able to get out, because they get a turn just as everybody else does. The one, you see a yellow on there, a level of service D, and that's for that northbound left entering the school in the morning. D is usually considered acceptable at intersections. If it gets onto that DE threshold, it's considered not so acceptable. And then with the roundabout, the operations were better for all of the peak hours. A summary of our data collection analysis is that the roadway itself, the segment functions great. It has a lot of capacity, and the volume isn't near the capacity that you would need a 3-lane or a 4-lane roadway. The peak hour volumes are what's really the problem, and it's 15 minutes in the AM peak and 15 minutes in the PM peak, and that's where it presents a little bit of a problem, because you want to make improvements, but you don't want to affect everybody else who drives through this intersection at other times of the day. Right now, no one going on north on Highland at Oak Street ever has to stop. And by installing an always stop sign, every time someone does that, whether it's 8 in the morning or 2 in the morning, they would have to stop at that intersection. There's a noise factor that comes with people who live there of starting and stopping as well. But it's that peak that we found, that we said here that the peak hour volumes at Oak Street especially occur, they're almost half of the daily volumes is occurring there, and it makes sense because of school. And then of those peak hours, over a third of it is just smashed into one 15-minute period. So it really is a small segment of the day. And it's left turns that are really the left turns into the high school, the left turns south onto Center Street that are really creating the operational issues here. And then we have the crashes, the driver inexperience at Oak Street are an issue. And I would think that there's just people who are waiting for such a long time that they take chances. That's what people do when they get sick of waiting. They take chances and accept gaps that are too small. That the crashes occur that way. Now, we observed on our video at the Oak Street intersection that we took, that's one of the benefits of us doing that, is we have video of people crossing the street going to school, and kind of what was mentioned in the first topic here today, people can park really close to that intersection right now. And it's tough to see someone as they pop out from behind a car when people are turning and they've been waiting, getting across there. And we even noticed a lot of people drop their child off on the west side of or the east side of the road, or pull onto Oak Street, park there and wait for their child to come in the afternoon, or drop them off there, so people are crossing the street a lot to get to school. And it's difficult with people parking that close to the intersection to see them as they come out. So that was one of the the tough things at that intersection. This is just a little math we did identifying that it's really 2% of the whole entire year, based on what we're saying is 30 minutes of bad operation in each peak hour, which, as I was talking with Mr. Kaler, might be even a little high. Might really only be 15 minutes of every peak hour. So it's 1 to 2% that we're really seeing an operational issue at this intersection. So talking through our alternatives, always stop, definitely improve the operation during peak times for those minor approaches, made the intersection work a lot better, allows the minor approaches to have protected movement. One of the downsides, it stops those people on the major approach on Center Street at that intersection and on North Highland Avenue at that intersection every time they come up to there, which it's probably only a 9-second delay in your life, but it's stopping, it's starting, it's noise for the neighbors. But it does have the benefit that it allows the intersection to function a lot better during those peak times. There are queuing issues that we saw in our model. There's a northbound left turn lane at Oak Street, and the queue extends there beyond that left turn lane and into the through lane. So if an always stop was installed there, there is the possibility that that might need to be lengthened. Or you combine lanes or do something a little different there. And then I didn't show a table, but in the report there's a table that shows statistics for each type of traffic control, and always stops generally have more crashes than minor approach stops, and that's a lot of time rear end, or you put an always stop and there's confusion of whose turn it is to go, and there's a lot of times minor crashes, but there's a lot more crashes that are seen from that. Another alternative was our mini roundabout, and a mini roundabout different from a single lane roundabout in the fact that it has a surmountable center island to allow, it's a smaller footprint, but it allows trucks and buses to use more of that center island and some of the medians as they pass through the roundabout. A roundabout is a good method to control a high volume of left turns because everyone that arrives at that intersection takes a right, and you only have to yield to the person on your left. You just drive a little farther around it. The minor approaches are allowed to proceed with a smaller gap than a minor approach stop control because the speeds are much less. People are generally going 15 to 20 miles an hour through a roundabout instead of 30 miles an hour being the speed limit out there, so the gaps can be smaller between cars for people to enter traffic. A benefit is those major approaches at 2 in the morning during the midday peak, they don't have to stop. They just slow a little to navigate that roundabout. It's a more consistent flow of traffic. The crash rate is comparable to what's existing out there, but generally with roundabouts, the crashes are less severe, and that's because you get side swipe crashes, you get some rear end crashes, but they're not the right angle, the left turn crashes of people T-boning each other as they're trying to make movements across the intersection. I kind of did the downside of this one is that it costs more than installing stop signs at an intersection, and we did a basic estimated cost with our roundabout designer of about $150,000 for this intersection. The one at Oak. The one at Center we thought could be done a little less expensive, and I think that's because it just would have to be because of the roadway, the footprint there, and the challenge there is you've got a city road and a county road intersecting, and so there's multiple agencies that need to agree on something. So we get into our other potential mitigation measures. One thing, we've worked with several school districts, and one of the main things in order to make it safer for drivers, for pedestrians, for buses, is to separate those buses in the passenger car traffic. And this most recent crash involved a bus not being able to get into onto Oak Street, so they waved someone out, and, well, it wasn't safe for that person. They couldn't see around the bus, and they got hit. If you take those buses out, have them go somewhere else, it makes it a safer situation. Now, the challenge we have here is it's undeveloped and the roads aren't all connected, so that's a long-term alternative or long-term solution for the high school. But it's definitely something that should be considered, because the drop-off areas are separated from parking areas, but they all have to go in the same spot to get in and out. As we had identified earlier, eliminate parking in the vicinity of the intersections. It's a pretty easy thing to do. Just pull that back 100, 150 feet, and the sight distance is there. You don't have to worry about people popping out behind cars. And one of the challenges is those northbound left turn people. One instance we saw in the video, excuse me, they didn't realize someone was pulling out. They'd been parking there, their kid jumped in, and they started to go because they'd been sitting there, and that person pulled away, and there was a near miss of a crash there. But if you get those people far away from the intersection, it's an easy solution for something like that. School crossing guards, there's a cost with that if it's a adult or a police officer, but I don't even know if they still do that in certain areas with children and their orange flags. But I mean, you put children at risk at the same time because they're inattentive drivers, and that there's a risk there, but it does provide a safer crossing for children. And then some ways to, it's not really an operational situation, but to make it safer is curb extensions, or bump outs as they're known. And that reduces the exposure of pedestrians across Center Street, across North Highland Avenue, and they have less distance to cross, so they're affecting traffic for less time, and they're less exposed to traffic in unsafe situations. There are costs to that. You have to build those bump outs, and there's sometimes water issues for flow lines and that kind of deal, but that is an option. And then the pedestrian activated flasher, those are at locations. They're a tough thing to put in my opinion, at intersections, just because of unsure movements. They're sometimes more appropriate mid-block, but it gives a safer situation for pedestrians to cross, but sometimes it's a false sense of security as well for those pedestrians if they assume that they're safe when they're in a situation like that. After doing all this, our recommendation, and we kind of had a recommendation of what to do. Something you could do right away is fix that parking issue at North Highland and Oak Street, and someone had the same idea, obviously, and make it a safer place to cross for people right now. At Oak Street and Highland, or at Center Street and Highland Avenue, it's a little tougher there. There's a lot of mature trees, and there are some sight distance issues. We didn't see as many pedestrians down there, but that's definitely something we could do at North Highland Avenue and Oak Street. And then our ultimate kind of solution or recommendation was to, our first concern was the Oak Street intersection. We believe that a mini roundabout could really solve those operational issues and not have the detriment of the making everyone stop in the off-peak hours. They really are safer solutions for pedestrian crossing because they only have to cross one direction of traffic at a time, and the traffic's moving much slower. And so it seems like an appropriate solution at this intersection. Again, Center Street, the issue with Center Street is that they are a little different class of roadways. You have a major collector and a more local roadway down there, especially on the south leg, and the fact that you have two agencies that need to cooperate on a solution. But that's what we came up with for what we believe is the correct solution for the Oak Street intersection first, and then to kind of see with the Center Street intersection to see if that can be fixed in a similar manner. So, questions? I'll say I had a video of a similar installation at Shakopee Middle School. We installed a mini roundabout there, and it has worked quite well for both pedestrians, buses. They play their high school football games at Shakopee Middle School, and it really moves the traffic well through there as in a high event type type situation as well. So I can't play that video, but it's really nice. So, questions, please.
I have a question about the crashes. I just
Yeah.
didn't understand. I understand like how crashes at four-way stops are higher than at roundabouts, but would any sort of thing help at the crash numbers up at that intersection? Like either a roundabout or a four-way stop? Would either of those improve?
At Oak Street, it's tough because we have a limited sample size of our crashes, but
Sure.
looking at 6 crashes in 2.5 years is quite a bit for an intersection like that, but not unexpected at a school. I was talking a lot with our roundabout designer, trying to get information just to educate myself a lot more on certain things, and there's the perception of, well, roundabouts are really confusing, which if you drive through them for the first time, they definitely can be. They're not something you're used to. But we've found that in instances where they're outside of schools, those people have no experience, and they're learning this is just as much as they're learning an all-way stop or anything. So they often are ones who negotiate the roundabout better. Now, so saying your question, I don't know if I can say that there definitely is probably a police officer for those 15 minutes of the day controlling traffic would be your best bet. That's not really a route you want to go down, in my opinion. Maybe it is. Costly. But you can reduce the severity, generally reduce the severity of those crashes, maybe not reduce the frequency with a roundabout, just because of the fact that people are going the same primary direction, and they're the side swipes, and, like I said, and maybe rear ends as opposed to the right angle and the head-on crashes. So, but sight distance is always a good thing for increasing safety at intersections.
Right.
So the parking part of that.
Is there enough room at Oak Street and North Highland to put a roundabout in?
We believe so. We've done, essentially what you see there would be the footprint, and with a mini one there, there'd be some work to cut in curbs, and there might be some catch basin extensions for the storm sewer and all that. But with the sidewalks in the area and just the size of that intersection right now, it seemed like there would be limited impact. And looking at where, I didn't have the right-of-way map, but looking at where those sidewalks are now, might not even need to take right-of-way or anything or affect those houses on the east side of North Highland Avenue. I don't know how moving west would be based on the school district owning that property, if they'd say, this might be better if you come in here, and they would provide that. I don't, for a safety and operational solution, that might be something they just to make that work even better, but something that could be worked out.
When you say mini roundabouts, I'm not familiar with that term, but I know there's a lot of truck traffic on these roads, especially the Center Street going out that way. How does that impact the ability to get semis,
Sure.
low boys in particularly, through that area?
and that's a really good question. A normal roundabout, one of the primary things is to have a raised center island so that you don't see oncoming traffic at you, because all you're paying attention to is people coming from the left, because we have to yield to. With many roundabouts, that center island is flattened out. It's identified with a different type of material or different color, but it's surmountable. And heavy vehicle users or operators and fire trucks and all that, the surmountable curb allows them to make more of a straighter line over there. It requires the attention of people going around the roundabout, and they have to pick their gap correctly. But they fully cater to the heavy vehicle traffic going through there. And that's one of the things, is that with the one that we have the video of outside the middle schools, there's a lot of school buses, and they successfully negotiate that. There's one outside a fire station, and they had their combination unit that went through there, and they were able to successfully negotiate it. So they use the median a little, they use the center island, but they're able to get through there.
I think they have those type of roundabouts like down in St. James, where and the intersections down there, where the vehicles, trucks especially, can just drive right over.
Yeah, some of the bigger ones have the truck apron.
Yeah.
So they have a 12-foot area that the truck's supposed to drive on. On some of the bigger ones, some of the smaller ones, they just are allowed to go right over the middle of it. So
I live right in this area, and I would agree with you. First of all, that has to be changed is how close to the intersection people can park. It's been pickups there, and it's very hard to see. I do like the idea of the roundabout, but again, then we need to keep the parking back away so that we can see better. But I think we've missed something here. We keep talking about Center Street and Oak. I've talked to several individuals that drive this route in the morning and after school, and they will tell you that Fifth North is far worse than Oak or Center. The traffic is backed up 2-3 blocks at Fifth North, and it's not quite as bad at the other two. And it's very slow, and that's a 4-way stop.
exactly, and so
And
that
it's
might
ugly.
and that might be a jumping ahead to if a always stop is constructed. I mean, the problem with that is no matter if you don't have really well distributed traffic at an always stop and you have a heavy movement in one direction, all those people have to stop and they end up queuing back. And so when you have a primary flow northbound in the morning on North Highland Avenue, that's probably where you're seeing your queuing going really far back. And so no matter what, you have to stop. Now, you're right.
I think there's 3 areas we need to look at, not just 2.
Mr. Chair, that actually was considered by the Safety Commission when this was put together as far as the consultant's proposal. We talked about that intersection needing some work. I mean, it's the same as Oak Street. I mean, if you're gonna do a roundabout at Oak, you'd probably do one at Fifth, but again, it's a county intersection, so you've gotta have some cooperation there, so.
And that's always, once you have a,
Yeah,
Coming down,
27.
it's good to have continuity of your system so that if you're, not go from a signal to an always stop to a roundabout to a back, if you get a corridor that has one on each end, that might be a good alternative in the middle. It sounds like I'm really pro roundabout, and I'm not. I understand. I am in these situations where it works right. It's a great solution. Unfortunately, they're put in sometimes in places where they really shouldn't be. But when the situation is right, they're really a great solution for issues.
Well, I know the 4-way stop is not working well at the top of Fifth North, nor down at the bottom of Fifth North with Garden. The lines are horrible. I drive it often, and it's not nice. I would say the roundabout's gonna move traffic a lot better.
Yeah.
I agree.
I also live in this area, and my kids will be walking across that street in a couple of years, so I have a vested interest in this. So where would the crossing be on a roundabout? Like, how would the kids be able to cross?
I am going to see. I'm gonna do something here. See if this works. They're generally 20 feet back from the intersection, so that when a driver approaches or leaves a roundabout, they first either, as they're approaching, they're looking at pedestrians, they're looking at a crossing, and then they're looking at traffic. Or as they're leaving, they leave, and there's actually, if it's a passenger car, a spot for them to stop that doesn't disrupt the operation of the roundabout. So it's pulled back. There's always exceptions if there's not space, or if you're if there's a lot of right-of-way, that's what you try and do to get it to work right.
Okay.
I'm gonna, you can play my video on here, but I have a picture of one that I could at least pass here.
You couldn't get that video to work?
No. We'll do it the old-fashioned way.
I know.
Is there a problem of the parking of the other vehicles in, around the roundabout? How far back do they have to?
For parking?
Yeah.
That is one of the things that you lose because of the way that one of the things that makes a roundabout work is the flare that you introduce, so you don't come 90 degrees into the intersection to slow people down. Yeah, that traffic moves back, so you would lose traffic, or you would lose parking.
You lose parking, yeah.
Yeah, you would definitely lose parking there. I can't say I can give you a good answer as to how much. But there could also be something like a parking bay almost, so that you're, I don't know necessarily how it would work. There appears on the southbound, on the south side, that there'd be room to do it maybe. But if any, this might be really hard to see, and I can pass it around too, but this is our one, so that you can
Oh,
see
yeah.
where the crossing is.
Yep.
So that's gonna,
Okay.
there was a bus going through there at one time, and some heavy vehicles, but I think this is as school is getting out. There aren't too many pedestrians now, but they show up later, but, so.
And I believe they put one of those in at St. Peter when they just built their high school. I just didn't get a chance to drive over there today.
It's kind of becoming we're doing one right now outside St. Michael, Albertville. There's a mini roundabout going on in front of their middle school, Buffalo High School. That was a tough sell, but their superintendent is all on board now. So it's a really good way to move traffic, and they've proven to be safer for pedestrians, so. They do have that downside that they cost a little bit more,
Right.
but it's a good long-term solution.
We would have to tear up part of Oak Street in order to get it put in, I suppose, in order to construction work. How much construction work would it take?
As far as like a duration, I couldn't tell you very well. I was versed on what it would take, and they really wouldn't have to go down into the existing pavement. It would be more cutting in medians, cutting in curb, and moving some things. So the fact that that roadway is in pretty good shape, there wouldn't be so much for the main line. It would be mainly curb and median and the center island, cutting that in. That's, I think, why the cost was estimated to be lower than when some of those other treatments are made. And I know we haven't really talked about the Center Street situation as much, but it seemed that the Oak Street was, as we were looking at this, even though the operations proved to be a little worse at Center Street, the more concern being the safety and the operations at the Oak Street intersection.
So, Mr. Kaler, question for you. if we were to want to do these right-of-ways, what kind of mechanism would be involved in getting the county on board? Would it be
To
a
construct the roundabouts?
Partnership, or do they have to
Uh,
absorb the
well-
cost, or how does that work?
We would have to approach the county engineer, and I sent them a copy of the study and the agenda for this meeting and see what their thoughts are. We can't force them to do it.
That would be on Fifth North only, wouldn't, or
Center
like
Street.
Fifth and Center?
Center and
Fifth Street and Center Street are both county roads.
One leg of Fifth North is the county road,
One leg of Fifth is,
yeah, and two legs is
Center
Center.
is totally.
Two legs are Center Street, east and west are county, so, the Oak Street would be on our jurisdiction only, so, it'd be a process. County and the city would, council and the commissioners would have to agree to do it, and there'd be a cost sharing, no doubt, so.
And it would, if something like that would happen, it would close down Highland during construction.
Oh, certainly, sure.
Because there is no exit basically to downtown other than Oak Street. Well, if you come down Highland, the first time you could head down into New Orleans, to the main
Fifth
part
North.
of town.
Fifth North.
Right, but you're coming from the highway, from Highway 14 over, there's nothing. You're.
Oh, yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
There are ways to stage, often to stage and build these under traffic so that it's the cheapest and quickest way to do it by just closing down the intersection as you try and keep things open and maintain traffic. Usually there's always a solution for that. It just lengthens the duration of construction and sometimes costs more for mobilization of the construction people, but yeah, because there's only so many ways to get down, basically,
Yeah.
that is an issue there. But.
Would we not be ahead to approach the county and do Fifth and Center at the same time? I mean, the parents that I've talked to that are driving it, and you tell them, tell me which is worse, they'll tell you Fifth North is worse, then Oak, and then Center for getting through in the morning and the afternoon. Wouldn't we be ahead to approach the county and do all of it at once with them? Within twice.
Where on Fifth are you concerned?
The whole intersection.
Which
The-
one? On
North
top of
Highland.
the hill or on
North
Top
bottom?
of the hill.
Top of the hill.
Traffic backs up way past Cherry Street. In the evening, it's way past 8th Street.
And this is during the school peak loading.
That, yes,
Peak
and
hour,
at
peak time.
between 11 and 12 o'clock also is
Yep.
really
Mhm.
bad.
Sure, that's the noon peak, yep.
Yep.
One question, is there sports fields being used at the high school at this time of the year?
I can't answer that, I don't know.
Is
There
that,
might be some, there could be some fields that are being
Because
used. Softball is probably being used.
the one thing I heard from some people is if there's sports activity going on up there, stay away. It's just as bad as the school because people park out in the street because it's easier to get to the athletic field than to go into the parking lot.
That's one thing I was gonna mention too, is the study that you guys did ended at 4 or 5 o'clock. But, so I was gonna ask you how you account for the evening activity, because it's just as busy up there in the evenings. You get plays, band concerts, choir concerts, any kind of thing.
Football games,
Yeah,
soccer,
yeah.
the whole thing, it's all there.
That area's gonna get used more and more.
More and
Definitely,
more.
and
Yep.
that was, we have counts. I mean, we did 24 hours worth of counts out
Okay.
there, and it could have been that we collected on a day when they didn't do anything. We have.
I looked it up, yeah, there were no activities that
Yeah,
night.
I think we have the directional counts, the hourly directional counts from the next day as well. But I have another project right now which is dealing with the National Sports Center in Blaine and how to time their traffic signals for a special event, and it's defining what your special event is, because it's a different thing every weekend, and it's hockey, or they use different areas, and yeah, sometimes it can be that when they're, just because they let out, you know, if you have a big play or a football game or whatever, they let out at the same time, and everybody's coming out and going the same direction at the same time, and that can be just as much challenging, like you said, as the peak hours out there. But yeah, I agree.
Sure. So our concern is, I think our concern is about traffic, which is important, but it's also about safety and getting the kids across the street. So your recommendation is a roundabout is safer for pedestrians than a four-way stop?
It is.
Okay.
And yeah, I mean, it is because of the fact that drivers only have to concentrate on two things at the roundabout. The pedestrians first, I mean the car in front of them, of course, but the pedestrians at first, and then the traffic coming from the left. And at an all-way stop, there's confusion sometimes of whose turn is it to go. You're looking around and don't always see that. And then you're crossing both directions at the same time. And there's just it's a lot more of a dynamic intersection at a four-way stop than at a roundabout. And it's usually pulled farther away from the intersection so that it's not really, they're not related so much. So.
Well, we got any other questions? Any other thoughts? One of my thought that came into my mind is when the city works on the 5th North, could something be incorporated into that construction time for working on 5th North to alleviate a problem?
Realistically, the answer is no. That's been locked in for 4 years in the
Okay.
federal program, and if we change the scope of the project,
Yeah, well,
we have to do an amendment, and it's probably not gonna happen.
that's what
But
what I wanted to
that
find
has-
out, so everybody
that has
knows what's going on.
been a thought in my mind as well, so we can research that a little further. But right now, it doesn't include that intersection.
Any other thoughts or questions?
So I do have one last question. So a roundabout, those take a while to get into the budget and to, get constructed. Is there anything that can be done temporarily to simulate it or do curb bump outs or anything like that? Or would just eliminating parking until something is done be sufficient?
I don't know that I'd say that's sufficient, but it goes a long way for the safety of pedestrians and bicyclists at that intersection. And even for certain turning movements, it makes that safer because you can see better at the intersection, and there aren't people waiting and suddenly taking off. I think the same with any construction project is if you're designing bump outs, the one problem with bump outs is they make water stop. And so you've got to look into how it affects flows and drainage and all that. So there's a design period and letting period and all that, the funding that goes through that.
So how far back would you suggest eliminating parking to help clean up the sight lines at that intersection?
Top of page 23 answers that. I'm sure you read that a couple of
He
times.
made sure that we got that in there.
All right, I missed that. Sorry about that.
It's 150 feet, I think.
All right.
100 feet.
I would think that's in a reasonable distance to begin with. If it doesn't work, we can always change it.
I mean, that's 5 parking spots,
Right now, there's an individual that parks their pickup every day right in the corner. And,
Same place, same spot.
yeah, it's like,
It hasn't been there since school let out, so I have a
Right.
feeling it's a student.
And, I mean, an issue with that too is you have to make sure that people, it's not only a no parking spot, but it's a no, if people are waiting there in their car, they say, well, I'm okay, I'm in my car, that still creates that hazard. So it's a no stopping, standing, whatever the terms are.
Whereas if we make it all no parking for that distance, he's cut off. He can't park there all the time.
Right.
Could you explain why they can't do anything with Fifth North right now? You said that can't happen, it's under a
I
four-year
I think the
plan?
chairman was suggesting next year we have a federal project on Fifth North from North Highland down to Garden Street. And in order for us to incorporate an additional intersection, we would have to go back and change what's called a step amendment to the project. It's kind of locked in, this is what we're gonna do. There's a description, there's a termini. So,
Okay.
doesn't mean we couldn't do it on the city's dime or the county's dime, but we can't do it as part of the federal project.
They move really slowly.
That's been in the hopper for 3 or 4 years already.
Yeah, because we've been talking about Fifth North as long as I've been on the commission.
I'm new.
But it's good to have your thoughts though, too. I mean, no idea is a bad idea, as long as it gets talked about. Kurt, you're sitting over there quietly and thinking, what are you thinking?
Just taking it all in.
Get your paintbrush out and move them parking spots back.
Yes.
I'm thinking the painter's coming in a couple of weeks, so we're gonna have to make our mind.
Well,
Just have them stay back 100 feet, in case you so do decide.
I think.
I think that is, right now, that's the quickest
Solution.
answer,
Right.
solution, and, because all the others gonna take more time, money, and that aspect, so
I'll just anticipate it.
that and
And that's
probably.
that's number one in the new business, but I thought this discussion would be
Yeah.
important.
Yeah,
to go
yeah.
with.
And then, Cindy sitting over there, I think we need the crosswalks. You know, when they do that, have crosswalks
Incorporate into it.
incorporated back a ways.
That was one of the areas that
Right.
we were gonna do the diagonal. Yeah, I think they've already
Oh,
painted
they've
some.
already painted, okay. But, yeah, by moving back the parking, those crosswalks will be more observed, okay.
There is, as long as you're at it, there, just from, I was telling Mr. Kaler, I didn't notice it the first time I was down here earlier this year, but as just driving down that road through those intersections today, there's really nice landscaping, but there's a tree right on that northwest corner that also is right where someone pops out when they're crossing the street, a pedestrian. Trees are a sensitive subject, but that's a way to make sight distance better as well, but that's not on the report, but that was just a,
That's on Center Street.
no, that's a,
Oh,
yeah. Center Street has some other ones that I'm sure people would miss
They
a
just
little bit.
planted,
Those
they just
left.
planted them.
no, is it in the North Highland Avenue Boulevard?
No, it's on the northwest corner,
It's on Oak Street?
yeah.
Okay, it's probably been there a couple of years. We'd have to look at that.
It's somewhat significant, I mean,
It's
it's
a
probably,
sightline problem, we can deal with it.
it might not be an issue, it was just something I noticed, but anyway.
Well, what are we gonna recommend, people?
I'd like to,
This agenda item is to receive the report. If you wanted to take an action, I guess you could, but it's just to receive the report. at
Or
this
do
stage.
we wanna take action, or do you wanna digest for another meeting and come up at another meeting, or what do you wanna do?
Well, why don't we accept the report
Mm-hmm.
and then go back to number one issue on the agenda? So we accept the report. I make a motion, we accept the report as given and consider the recommendations. That's that recommendation.
So I have a question. If we accept the report, what happens next? It just sits till we come back to it?
Well, no, then we can go back to issue number
I'm
one.
not talking about issue one. I'm talking about what happens to the discussion of what we do. I mean, do we have to come back to it then next month and talk about this again?
No, we can do it, we can go, like I say, go back to number one, which is Highland and Oak.
Yes, but then what do we do with the report?
what do we do with the roundabouts?
Mr. Chair, it's entirely up to the commission. If you want to put it back on the agenda for some type of action, we can do that. I just thought you needed some time to kind of process this. You could get together at a work session, discuss it. You could just do it at a meeting. It's entirely up to this group.
Yeah, because we got a lot of stuff fed to
Yeah,
us today.
right.
There's a lot of
with
information.
this,
here.
a lot of
There's a lot
information
information to look
in
at.
this report.
Mr. President, don't we need to act on this so something can start rolling and the funding and budgets and all of that? I mean, every month we put it off. We aren't gonna meet now in July and August.
We can always meet at,
You
if
can
you wanna meet in July, I can call a meeting in July. That's not a problem.
The earliest any type of construction activity could take place would be 2019.
Yeah.
So you've got some time to kind of digest this. You'd make a recommendation to the city council. They'll have to decide if they move forward with the recommendation or not, especially if it has something to do with the county. It's gonna take some time.
Which is the painter. Something that can be done immediately.
I would like to make a motion that we move the parking back at the intersection of Oak and Highland to 150 feet. So there's a clear area, and we will take up the recommendation of the roundabout maybe at the next meeting.
You said 150 feet, the report asked for 100. Which-
100? Okay, 100 then?
Okay.
100
You wanna hold
feet?
it back to 100?
I'll hold it back to 100.
Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair.
Yep.
We have a motion on the floor
From
from
him,
Don.
and I got another
Never
motion
got a
there over there.
second.
Did you make a
I
motion?
think, Joanne, you're maybe referring to number one on the.
Yeah, I
don't
didn't
mean
realize
to-
you made it in the form of a motion.
Well, I made a formal motion to accept the report.
Yep,
And then I felt that we can, accepting the report, then we can go back to number one.
okay. Everybody hear that?
Don needs a second. If
I
you
need a
wanna give-
second.
If you want to give him a second.
If you
I
don't
need
wanna
a
get-
second.
I'll second the accepting of the report.
Okay.
Okay.
Any further discussion on accepting the report? Any further discussion on accepting the report? All those in favor of accepting the report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now,
Now Joanne has a motion on the floor.
now we got a motion on the floor from Joanne.
Make a
Gotta
motion
clear up.
to restrict parking within 100 feet of the intersection of North Highland and Oak,
I'll second.
as soon as they do the painting of the streets.
Is that on Highland only or on
I think Highland and
Island
Oak.
only? Okay.
Highland and Oak Street.
Do you want both streets or you want just one?
Oak Street already has no parking to the west. We eliminated that because of that turn lane.
Yeah,
That's a good question though about to the east.
What do you think?
I don't think it's really necessary to the east. I think you'd be
And just Highland?
making it more difficult for people living there. You're already supposed to not park within 30 feet of an intersection,
20 feet of the crosswalk or
Yeah.
stop sign or something like that.
right? So that's not really a concern because there's hardly any traffic for people crossing there.
So I'll amend it for restrictions on North Highland at the intersection of Highland and Oak.
you want to amend your motion, restrict, had the restrictive painting only done on Highland,
At the intersection
at
of
the
North
intersection of
Highland.
Highland and Oak. Everybody heard that?
And my second remains.
You second it. I have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion as stated signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carried. Now we've got to go back and still take care of this other.
Did.
We just did. We got all of it covered, all right? As long as everybody's happy, that's covered.
Do we need to address the roundabouts to the next?
Do we want to put it on the agenda for the next meeting?
I
Yes.
think so,
Yes.
yes.
Is that?
Sure.
Mr. Taylor, can you put that on?
We will add it as old business, possible action, which leads me to the comment, July 5th is your next meeting, which is the day after
Day
the
after.
4th of July. So I don't know what you want to do with that. We can schedule it if you want.
Do we want to schedule one on July 5th, or do we want to bump it down a couple of weeks, or we want to go to August?
August.
August? Everybody saying August is good? July 5th,
Still have plenty of time.
appointed time. On August, I don't remember what the date would be, but I have to look it up. Probably somewhere around the 5th, too.
Joel will have it faster than I will.
Joe's got it on his computer already.
It would be August 2nd.
August 2nd.
Okay?
Next meeting will be August 2nd. I'll even put it on my sheet so I remember it. 5 p.m. here in the council chambers. Okay. We want to thank you for your report. I think it's been very, very informative that people got to see, how much work you put into it and what your thoughts are. Because I've got these people to think, I'm trying to get everybody together to see what their thoughts are too, and I'm glad to have you give us your insight.
Well, thank you for having me.
Is there any other business that I missed? Mr. Taylor, you got anything?
Nope.
Myron?
Nothing, Chair.
Rest of the people, is there any other business that should be brought before the commission at this time? Well, I can either close it or I can have a motion. I would rather have a motion because then I don't,
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn. Do I hear a
Second that.
I have a second. Any further I gotta get this into you, Bob. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? All those in favor of adjourning the meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Meeting is adjourned. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for your input.
Oh, it was a long meeting.
Next meeting in August.
It gets to be a long, August meeting